When most people look at Agnes Mackenzie and Garth Chapin in the Testaments, they see something simple: a sheltered girl from one of Gilead's most powerful families and a quiet guardian who slowly falls for her. But the deeper you look, the more disturbing and brilliant their relationship becomes. Because this was never just a romance. It was infiltration. It was psychological warfare. And without even realizing it at first, Agnes and Garth became one of the most dangerous weapons ever planted inside Gilead itself. What makes their story fascinating is that neither of them begins as a revolutionary in the traditional sense. Agnes isn't trying to overthrow the government. Garth isn't some loud rebel leader carrying guns through the streets. Instead, they destroy Gilead from the inside, quietly, patiently, almost invisibly. And that's exactly why they're so effective. At the beginning of the season, Agnes still represents the ideal Gilead daughter on the surface. She lives inside privilege. She's protected by Commander Mackenzie's status. She follows the rules she's been taught her entire life. But underneath that obedience is fear. Agnes has always sensed something wrong with the world around her. The forced marriages, the silence, the constant control over women, the way everyone performs holiness while hiding cruelty underneath. She doesn't fully understand it yet, but deep down, Agnes already knows Gilead's version of morality is built on lies. And that's where Garth enters the story. At first, Garth seems almost too calm to matter. He isn't loud. He doesn't attract attention. He acts exactly like the kind of obedient guardian Gilead rewards. But that's the disguise. Because Garth is actually one of Mayday's most important deep cover operatives. And his placement inside the Mackenzie household is not accidental. That detail changes everything. Garth wasn't randomly assigned there. He was strategically planted close to one of Gilead's elite families because Mayday understands something crucial. You cannot destroy Gilead only from the outside. You have to poison it internally. The regime's greatest weakness is its own arrogance. Commanders believe they are untouchable. They believe loyalty can be manufactured through fear and religion. But fear creates cracks, and people like Garth know exactly how to slip through them. One of the smartest parts of his operation is how invisible he makes himself. Gilead notices dramatic rebels. It notices emotional outbursts. It notices obvious resistance. But it rarely notices quiet men who appear disciplined. That's why Garth survives. And his role becomes even more dangerous when we learn he's also connected to Daisy's mission. Daisy initially enters the story believing she's simply uncovering truths about Gilead and Commander Mackenzie's suspicious dealings. But Garth acts as a handler behind the scenes, guiding her closer to Agnes. That means Agnes unknowingly becomes the center of an intelligence network. Think about how terrifying that is from Gilead's perspective. A commander's own household is being used as a resistance hub, and nobody realizes it. Even more interesting is why Mayday targets Commander Mackenzie specifically. The rumors surrounding Japanese arms deals are not random political drama. They hint at something bigger happening beneath Gilead's polished image. The regime is unstable, powerful leaders are desperate, and international relationships are beginning to crack. If Gilead were truly strong, it wouldn't need secret deals operating in the shadows. That's one of the hidden themes running throughout the season. Authoritarian systems always pretend to be invincible right before they begin collapsing. And Garth understands this before Agnes does. That's why his upcoming promotion to commander matters so much. On the surface, it looks romantic. Agnes believes that once Garth becomes a commander, they could finally marry properly. But underneath that hope is something far more strategic. A commander has access to military plans, access to political meetings, access to secrets that ordinary guardians never see. Mayday isn't just creating a spy, they're preparing to place one of their own at the highest levels of power. And that's where the story becomes morally complicated, because even though Garth genuinely cares for Agnes, his original mission still involved using her proximity to Commander Mackenzie. That tension is what makes their relationship feel real instead of superficial. Garth isn't manipulating Agnes because he enjoys it. He's doing it because resistance movements often demand terrible sacrifices, and Agnes herself slowly becomes trapped between love and truth. One of the most powerful aspects of her arc is how rebellion begins through tiny actions rather than giant speeches. Modern audiences sometimes expect revolution to look dramatic, but in the Testaments, rebellion starts psychologically. It starts with curiosity, with discomfort, with questioning things you were told never to question. That's why the cigarette scene matters so much more than people realize. When Agnes smokes Garth's discarded cigarette, it's not just a rebellious teenage moment. It symbolizes contamination. Gilead's purity culture depends on total obedience, especially from women. By doing something forbidden, Agnes experiences something emotionally dangerous for the first time: choice. And once someone experiences personal choice inside an authoritarian system, complete control becomes impossible again. That moment quietly signals the death of the obedient Agnes. Another brilliant detail in the season is how conversations about the outside world slowly reshape her mind. Garth and Daisy never aggressively force rebellion onto Agnes. Instead, they expose her to possibility, freedom, alternative ways of living, the idea that women elsewhere are allowed to think, speak, and choose for themselves, and suddenly Gilead's entire worldview starts collapsing inside her head. That process is extremely realistic. Most indoctrinated people do not change instantly. They unravel slowly, painfully. You can actually see Agnes trying to reconcile the contradictions around her. If Gilead is holy, why is there so much fear? If commanders are righteous, why are there secret crimes? If women are supposedly protected, why do they live like prisoners? Those questions become impossible to silence. And then comes the biggest emotional turning point of all, the truth about her identity. Because Agnes is not just another Gilead daughter. She is June Osborne's child, the biological daughter of one of Gilead's greatest enemies. That revelation completely reframes her life. Suddenly, all the feelings she never understood begin making sense. Her emotional discomfort inside Gilead isn't weakness, it's inheritance. June's defiance exists inside her long before Agnes consciously accepts it. And Daisy's identity makes this even more devastating, because Daisy is not merely another rebel operative. She's Agnes's sister, separated by Gilead, raised in different worlds, yet both pulled back toward the same fight. This is where the Testaments becomes more than a political story. It becomes a story about stolen family connections. Gilead doesn't just control bodies. It destroys identities. It rewrites relationships. It steals children and rebuilds them into tools of the state. So when Agnes and Daisy slowly move toward each other without initially understanding who they truly are, the emotional tension becomes heartbreaking. And it's also symbolic. The regime tried to erase June's family forever. Instead, those broken pieces become the foundation of Gilead's destruction. That's poetic. But the most fascinating character in this entire operation may actually be Aunt Lydia. Because while Agnes and Garth operate as active infiltrators, Lydia operates as something even more dangerous: a historian, a collector of evidence. At first glance, Aunt Lydia still appears loyal to Gilead. She enforces rules, she maintains discipline, she speaks the language of the regime. But underneath that exterior, she's documenting crimes, carefully, methodically, almost like she knows the system will eventually fall. And that detail matters because tyrannies survive by controlling narratives. If history disappears, accountability disappears with it. Lydia understands this. So while Garth gathers military intelligence and Agnes becomes a social gateway into elite households, Lydia preserves the truth itself. Together, they form different parts of the same weapon. And that's why the Trojan horse comparison fits perfectly. The Mackenzie household appears loyal from the outside, but hidden inside are spies, informants, secret daughters, forbidden relationships, and collapsing faith in the regime. The danger isn't outside Gilead's walls anymore. It's already inside the house. And honestly, that's what makes the Testaments so terrifying compared to The Handmaid's Tale. This isn't just about surviving oppression anymore. It's about watching the next generation learn how to dismantle it intelligently, not through brute force, but through information, through emotional awakening, through infiltration, through truth. By the end of the season, Agnes and Garth's relationship transforms into something much bigger than romance. They become proof that authoritarian systems eventually create the very people who destroy them, because Gilead made one fatal mistake. It believed controlling people physically meant controlling them completely. But ideas are harder to imprison, questions are harder to kill, and once Agnes begins seeing the truth, there's no going back. The obedient daughter Gilead tried to create is gone. In her place stands someone far more dangerous, a believer turned witness,